Welcome back. Today we are doing a deep dive into, well, perhaps the single most influential literary and cultural artifact in all of human history, the Holy Bible.
That's right.
And our mission today, just to be clear, is pretty straightforward. We are setting aside any religious interpretation entirely.
Completely.
We're looking at this purely as, a historical document, a piece of world literature, and really a foundational text for understanding global culture.
Exactly. Our approach here is like how a literary scholar might look at Homer or maybe Shakespeare. It's this indispensable source text.
Yeah.
It shaped laws, ethical ideas, art, even our everyday language for, well, millennia.
Yeah.
You really can't understand Western civilization, arguably even global history, without grappling with this text on some level.
And just to really hammer home why this is so crucial, let's start with a key finding from the sources we reviewed.
Okay.
Statistically, this book is the most widely read, most influential book ever published, period. It's shaped morality, politics, culture across continents for thousands of years.
The cultural reach is just staggering. I mean, obviously, it's the sacred text for billions within Christianity.
Of course.
But we have to remember its deep, deep roots in Judaism and the Old Testament is the Hebrew Bible, and its historical significance is also acknowledged within Islam. So when you add that all up, its stories, its moral concepts, they've touched in some way perhaps half the world's population.
Okay, right. So let's try to unpack this a bit. Before we even get to the impact, we need to understand its architecture. Because when we say the Holy Bible, it's not like one book written by one person, is it?
Oh, far from it. Not at all. Think of it more like an anthology. Or maybe a library, a sprawling library, really.
Right, library. I like that.
And what's fascinating, architecturally speaking, is how it was assembled over this vast period of time. Our sources estimate the writing spans well over 1,000 years.
1,000 years, wow.
Yeah, with contributions from over 40 distinct authors. And these weren't all the same kinds of people. Either you had kings, prophets, fishermen, doctors, all sorts.
That's incredible diversity.
Yeah.
And the languages, too. It wasn't just written in one language. Why is that significant that it originated in 3 different tongues?
Yeah, the languages. Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. That detail is crucial for a couple of reasons, I think.
Okay.
The oldest parts, primarily the Old Testament, are in Hebrew, the language of the ancient Israelites. Then later on, some sections use Aramaic, which was, closely related, spoken commonly in the region.
Right.
But then the New Testament makes this big shift almost entirely to Koine Greek.
Koine Greek.
Yeah, which was the common everyday Greek spoken across the Eastern Mediterranean during the Roman Empire. It was the lingua franca.
Got it.
So this linguistic evolution itself tells a story. It shows the text moving, expanding geographically and culturally from this sort of localized ancient tradition to a much more widely accessible text in the Roman world. And that has huge implications for how it was translated and interpreted, even right up to today.
That makes a lot of sense. It paints a picture of a living collection, something that grew and evolved, not just, poof, appeared all at once.
Exactly.
And the sheer variety of writing styles, the genres packed inside this library, it seems to cover almost everything.
It really does. It's definitely not just theology or religious rules. You've got these detailed legal codes right next to sweeping historical narratives.
Okay.
There's profound wisdom literature, like Proverbs, soaring poetry, like the songs, prophecy, personal letters, even apocalyptic vision.
So much variety.
Yeah, you can find like technical instructions for building a temple right alongside the quite erotic love poetry of the Song of Solomon. It's an amazing mix.
Okay, let's try to nail down the basic structure for listeners. This huge library is generally organized into 2 main sections, right? Those are kind of the non-negotiable.
That's the fundamental division, yes. First, the Old Testament, often called the Hebrew Bible.
Right.
This covers creation, the covenant with Israel, the history of the kingdoms, up to about 400 BC or so.
Okay.
Then second, you have the New Testament. This focuses on the life, death, resurrection of Jesus, and then the letters and accounts of the very beginnings of the early Christian church.
And in terms of book count, just to give people a concrete number.
Sure. If we're talking about the most commonly referenced version in, say, the Protestant tradition, that's 66 books total.
66.
Yeah, 39 in the Old Testament and 27 in the New Testament.
So 66 different texts, sometimes written centuries apart by dozens of authors. The big question then, from a literary perspective, is how does something that vast hold together? Is there a central plot or theme?
That's the key question, isn't it? According to the scholars we looked at, the main thread binding this whole collection together is this dynamic, ongoing relationship between the creator figure, God, and humanity.
Ah,
All the different parts, the stories, the laws, the poetry, the prophecies, they all, in some way, explore that central covenant relationship. Its successes, its failures, its renewals.
that's a really useful way to think about it, because the feel of the two testaments can be quite different, can't it?
Oh, definitely. There's a noticeable shift.
So, if the Old Testament often feels focused on law, covenant, maybe justice, what happens thematically when we move into the New Testament?
It's a shift in emphasis, for sure. The Old Testament spends a lot of time on, creation stories, defining the law, giving moral guidance, and often emphasizes this idea of collective identity, tribal or national identity.
Right, the community.
Exactly. When you get to the New Testament, the themes often become more, let's say, individualized and internal.
Like,
Things like love, forgiveness, salvation, the idea of spiritual rebirth, hope. It's often seen as a move from perhaps external codes and rituals towards internal transformation.
interesting. Now, if we're looking at this purely through that cultural influence lens, thinking about secular ethics, law,
Yeah.
morality, did the source material point to one single concept from the Bible that really permeated global ethical thinking?
Yeah, it did. And interestingly, it wasn't necessarily the prohibitions like don't steal or don't murder. Those are pretty common in ancient law codes across cultures.
Okay, so what was it?
The concept highlighted most often as sort of a unique contribution to universal ethics was love and compassion. Specifically, that core teaching, love your neighbor as yourself.
Ah, yes, that's everywhere.
It really is. And that instruction, while obviously central for believers, has arguably become foundational for modern concepts of humanitarianism, universal human rights, ideas that really transcend specific religious dogma.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting for anyone who loves literature.
Yeah.
Our source review gave the Bible's literary quality a perfect 5 stars.
Yep, top marks.
How does an ancient anthology full of laws and history achieve a literary rating that high? It feels a bit counterintuitive.
It's precisely because of that incredible range and the mastery of different techniques within it. The writing isn't monotonous at all.
Right.
You have these compelling narrative arcs in the historical books, quite sophisticated political commentary sometimes, and then you hit something like the Psalms.
The poetry.
Exactly. Hebrew poetry, which relies heavily on parallelism, not so much on rhyme like we might expect in English.
Parallelism.
Hmm.
That's where the second line kind of echoes or builds on the first.
Precisely. It creates this powerful, rhythmic, very memorable structure. Think about it. It must have made these ideas incredibly sticky, easy to memorize, and pass down orally for generations before widespread literacy.
That makes sense. Easy to remember, easy to chant or sing.
Absolutely. And then contrast that with, say, the Book of Proverbs. Short, punchy, aphoristic wisdom, very direct. Or compare that to the language in books like Isaiah or Revelation, which is majestic, highly symbolic, almost operatic in its scope. It uses these profound metaphors and vivid imagery.
So it can be grand and symbolic, but also simple and direct.
Exactly. Like the parables in the Gospels, simple stories used to teach complex moral or spiritual lessons. That ability to shift register is part of its literary power.
It's just remarkable, isn't it? To think we're speaking English today using metaphors and phrases that were conceived in, the ancient Near East thousands of years ago.
It really is.
Let's talk about that specific linguistic impact. The King James Version, the KJV, from 1611, it's always cited as this giant of English literature. Why is that specific translation so important?
Ah, the KJV. Well, it was, quite simply, the single most printed and widely read book in the English-speaking world for almost 300 years, maybe more.
Wow. Dominant.
Hugely dominant. And its translation work happened during a really critical, formative period for the English language itself. So the KJV didn't just reflect English, it actively shaped English prose, syntax, and vocabulary.
The standardized things.
In many ways, yes. Phrases from the KJV didn't just become common sayings, they became embedded in the very structure of the language. They formed our idioms.
Can you give us a few examples, phrases we might use without even realizing they come from the Bible, specifically the KJV?
Oh, sure. Loads of them. Think about a labor of love.
Okay, yeah.
Or fight the good fight. Eat, drink, and be merry. A wolf in sheep's clothing. The powers that be by the skin of your teeth.
Wow, those are everyday phrases.
Absolutely. Dozens, maybe hundreds more. They entered the common lexicon directly because the KJV was the book people read, heard read aloud, and memorized for centuries. You just can't study English literature or even really understand modern English fully without acknowledging the KJV's massive fingerprint.
It wasn't just the language itself. It directly influenced the great writers, too, right? You
Mhm.
mentioned Shakespeare, Dante, Milton earlier.
Exactly. I mean, try reading Milton's Paradise Lost without knowing the basic narrative of Genesis or Revelation. Huge chunks of it would be almost incomprehensible.
Right, the references wouldn't land.
Not at all. Same with Dante's Inferno and its structure based on theological concepts. Or
Oh.
think about the deep moral questions and archetypes Shakespeare plays with. So many have biblical resonances.
Hmm.
So viewing the Bible as this source text, this literary foundation, it really unlocks centuries of Western art, not just literature, but painting, sculpture, music too. Think of Handel's Messiah or Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel.
It's the key to understanding so much cultural expression.
It really is.
So let's pull back a bit. What does this all add up to? Beyond the text itself, beyond influencing writers and artists, what's its broader legacy today, viewed historically and culturally?
Well, the impact operates on multiple levels, as we've touched on. Culturally, it provided blueprints for legal ideas, ethical frameworks, everything from ancient covenant law to concepts that, centuries later, informed arguments about universal human rights.
Okay.
Artistically, as we said, countless masterpieces draw directly from its narratives. It's just a central pillar of the Western artistic tradition. And
Yes.
historically, the text itself is this incredible, sprawling document of ancient cultures, kingdoms, conflicts, traditions, stretching over maybe 1,500 years or more. It offers invaluable insights, though often debated by historians, of course, into the ancient Near East.
Okay, but any fair assessment, especially one trying to be objective like ours, needs to acknowledge the challenges, right? The critiques that the source material also raised, especially for a modern reader.
Absolutely. And the challenges are real. They mostly center around, I'd say, accessibility and consistency.
How so? Accessibility first.
Well, first, the language can be complex, especially if you pick up an older translation like the KJV we were just discussing. It's beautiful, but the language can feel dense, archaic to modern ears.
Sure.
Second, let's be honest, some sections are just difficult to interpret. They come from vastly different cultural contexts. Some parts contain material that feels culturally dated or raises significant ethical questions for a 21st century reader.
That makes sense. What about consistency?
Yes. The issue there goes back to the library concept we started with. Not everyone's library has exactly the same books on the shelf.
Meaning different versions of the Bible.
Exactly. We have to note that different religious traditions use slightly different collections, different canons.
Okay.
The Protestant canon of 66 books we mentioned is the most common in some parts of the world, but it's not the same as the Catholic or Eastern Orthodox canons.
What's the main difference there?
The primary difference involves a set of writings often called the Apocrypha or the Deuterocanonical books, as Catholics refer to them.
Right, I've heard of those.
These are historical and wisdom writings from the period between the Old and New Testaments. They're included in the Old Testament by Catholic and Orthodox traditions, but generally excluded, or sometimes placed in a separate section, by Protestants.
So knowing that difference exists is pretty crucial for understanding the diversity within the Bible itself.
It absolutely is. It reminds us it's not monolithic.
Okay. But despite those complexities, those differences in structure, the final evaluation from our source material really speaks volumes about its enduring status, doesn't it?
It does. 5 out of 5 stars for cultural significance. 5 stars for literary quality. That's quite an assessment.
Yeah. The only slightly lower mark was for accessibility.
Right, 4 stars there.
Yeah.
Which seems fair given the language hurdles and the, cultural distance we sometimes feel from the ancient context. But overall, as a text shaping history, ethics, and literature, unparalleled importance.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, our listeners. We've kind of mapped the architecture, explored the themes, traced the incredible reach of this collection of texts. It really is a document of profound duality, isn't it?
It truly is. Deeply spiritual for billions, yes, but also undeniably historical and literary for everyone, regardless of belief.
Yeah.
The sources really compel us to view this massive collection, not just as scripture, but as this vast, sprawling document of the human experience itself. It captures such a full spectrum of life, doesn't it? Creation, suffering, love, betrayal, faith, doubt, redemption. Our seemingly eternal search for meaning played out across different empires, different cultures, different millennia.
It definitely stands as one of the most powerful and certainly one of the most enduring books ever written. So the question we leave you with is this. What new layer of understanding do you gain when you consciously set aside the religious context just for a moment and view the Bible purely through that literary or historical lens? When you really acknowledge its direct, tangible influence on the language you speak and the culture you navigate every single day?